going to be talking about intuitive perception this morning. Intuitive perception is not ESP. It's a, I think most of us know this, but from a spiritual point of view, what I'm hoping that we walk away from this morning is the recognition that, first of all, the teachings says we're not really human beings until we begin to function in the light of the intuition. That means to us that we have a connection to the Buddhic body, which means we've also built the Buddhic body, at least some of it. I'm not going to be talking about how to build the Buddhic body this morning, having not yet experienced that. Nonetheless, this is our future. So I'll be talking about what is intuitive perception this morning, what is intuition, what does the intuition have to do with knowledge, how do we work the two together, and also intellect. We, you know, in the New Agey world, we meet interesting people. Like the images that I get from such people is that they're sitting on the floor on a really fluffy pillow in a lotus position, and that's their life. You know, that their work life, their service life, their relationship life is all secondary to sitting on that pillow in a lotus position and meditating. And they let us know that this is what being spiritual means. This is what being intuitively perceptive means. But we're in a very different teaching. You know, our teaching is practical and experiential and doesn't remove us from the world. It says if you want to be intuitive, if you want to live in the light, you must also live in a life of service and relationship and building right human relations, let's put it that way. So, going back, you're going to understand why this isn't ESP. Why this isn't, oh, I just have this gut feeling. Or some people will say, well, you know, I have this feeling that you were doing that. I don't really know what that feeling is, and I don't really know what you were doing, but I just have that sense. That's not intuition. Intuition or intuitive perception is a full knowingness. Okay. Supermundane, verse 507, has something very interesting to tell us about what intuition is. The verse reads, again, this is from verse 507 of Supermundane. Earth's body knows that the idea of intuition is often misinterpreted or even abused. People suppose that intuition can be acquired without effort. It's like that gut feeling, you see? Or that it just simply falls upon them from the sky. They do not think about this is really important, they do not think about the vast accumulations intuitive individuals must have and the enormous tensions that they must endure. So I'm going to repeat this sentence. They do not think about the vast accumulations intuitive individuals must have and the enormous tensions that they must endure. Vast accumulations is a reference to the chalice. What you have accumulated over various incarnations into the chalice. Enormous tension is the result of fire. It is being able to sustain fire in your entire being and hold it in the process of your day-to-day life, or in the process of your service, or in the process of let's say listening to a lecture that's really fiery. I was thinking back this morning when we would listen to Torquem Serdarian speak to us. He carried fire. 10, 15 minutes into his lecture, you could see people nodding off. It was very interesting. And that just always stayed in my mind as an example of what it means that we can only hold a certain amount of this enormous tension that is the result of fire. And then our body shuts down. It says, I can't handle any more of this. So I'm going to read this sentence a third time so it really, penetrates into our consciousness. They do not think about the vast accumulations intuitive individuals must have and the enormous tensions that they must endure. It is hard to imagine, goes on with the verse, it is hard to imagine how few there are in whom this quality is already developed. Even then, for some of them, it manifests itself only in certain ways. For example, if someone has premonitions regarding his dear ones and can actually foretell physical events or receive insights about himself, that does not mean that such a person can also intuit other kinds of events. It is important to know that the development of intuition requires an understanding of the condition of those around one. I'm going to read this again because to me this is so important, and if I hear something 2 or 3 times, I'm more likely to remember it than just one pass through. So just bear with me. It is important to know that the development of intuition requires an understanding of the conditions of those around us. We could talk a lot about what does this mean? What does understanding the condition of those around us, what does that mean? Does anybody have an idea? You could raise your hand. I know this is unusual. We usually don't do this, but I think this is important. Mm-hmm.
To know the level of the people around you?
To know the level of the people around you, that's probably some of it. The level of consciousness, right. Charles?
Possibly be able to have a soul connection with the soul of the people around you. In other words, instead of on the physical...
Well, to have a soul connection with someone around you sounds really good if they're awake.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's part of it. Carol?
Possibly to understand the karma.
Understand the karma? Okay. Catherine, you had your...
To have an idea of what they may be going through in their life.
I just think it's sensitivity and feeling.
Yeah. See, that's how I would see it, which would include, the level of consciousness, whether the soul, is awake or not. If we recognize that we have a certain percentage of intuitive perception, then it means that we are able to move beyond the personality of the individual. And that would include recognizing some of their karma. That we can move beyond the personality and really think and perceive the depth of the need of that individual. And then to be able to share the depth of the nature of that individual according to what they are capable of handling. Also, knowing the condition means we don't have to speak verbally to that person. If they have a certain amount of light in their nature, meaning that their soul is awake, there can be an intuitive interaction subjectively with each of them. So, understanding of the condition of those around one. That's what I think. I think we're just touching the iceberg, tip of the iceberg, so to speak. But it is the process of really getting to know someone. And when you're in that intuitive process of getting to know someone, you're not here. You yourself, you're over here. You're not going to be talking to them about who you are. You're not going to say, well, my guidance told me this about you. Or, I want you to pay attention to me because I'm intuitive. See, it's just, I know this seems a little nonsensical, but it's really important because we are, our intuitive perception based on the content of our chalice, based on our contact with higher energy, when we have a communication, a subjective, a subtle communication with that person, we're affecting their future. Very interesting. Serious stuff. Okay, moving on. Again, this is in the quote. Only in a state of an attuned and aligned consciousness can the inner voice be made clear. It is possible to develop the inner voice until it becomes constant. Took me a while to understand what does it mean to be constant. But then it's like, once I perceived what that meant, holy cow, boy, is this right on. I really get it. What does this mean? If you're in constant contact with the noise of the universe, you're going to go crazy. If you're listening to all of these voices, you're going to go crazy. If your perception is so sensitive that you can see entities walking down the hallway and into the sanctuary and sitting down, and it's so distracting, you're not going to be able to say anything. You're going to be going a little, and so this is the practical side of the teaching, is saying, and this is what it says. It is possible to develop the inner voice until it becomes constant, but because of the chaotic vibrations on Earth, we do not advise you to try to overcome the conditions of the dense world to such an extent. Imagine someone who, amidst earthly activity, unceasingly listens to his inner voice. He would become like one who abandons his work in order to listen to the radio. That was interesting. He would perish without sleep or nourishment. So we have to learn how to turn it on and turn it off. Turn it on and turn it off. We don't want to hear everybody's thoughts, nor do they want us to hear all of their thoughts either. But it is possible, and we know it is possible, to hear somebody's thoughts just as audibly as you can hear me speaking. That we can hear someone's thoughts as clearly as we can when we speak out loud. So if this is the case, we need to know when not to listen, right? Therefore, let the inner voice ring only when it is struck by a particular sound and vibration. In other words, recognizable sound and vibration. Recognizing the sound and voice frequency of your solar angel or your master. In this way, one will not abandon the earthly path and will be in contact with the higher world without disrupting your inner equilibrium. If you've read the stories about the life of Helena Rourke, which she was very open in some cases, of talking about her experiences when Master M would speak to her, when the Great Lord would speak to her, when Master Kutumi would speak to her. But it wasn't always like that. It wasn't always so clear. And it was upsetting to her because she would hear voices and she couldn't really identify, is this Saint Sergius who is talking with her? But she lived in a very different life than we do. But she eventually learned how to recognize the frequency of that voice that was contacting her. So in that way, she was still in control. She could turn it off and turn it on without disrupting her inner equilibrium. Helena Rourke explained that there are 7 senses, the 5 that are well known, but there is also a 6th and a 7th sense. The 6th sense is called straight knowledge, which is also called intuition, which is still rare. Now, this is in one of her letters that she's writing, a letter that was written July 1934 and also May 8th, 1935. The 6th sense is called straight knowledge or intuition. Now, pay attention to this because it's not so black and white. Which is still rare. And then the 7th sense, which is synthesis. So the 6th sense is straight knowledge or so-called intuition. So-called will be explained in a minute. And the 7th sense is synthesis. Straight knowledge, she says, is knowledge and experience accumulated in our chalice. It is the so-called intuition, but of an extremely high quality. So she's writing very mysteriously here. She's not giving us the full picture. We recognize this. Okay, straight knowledge is the result of the accumulation that is in our chalice. But is this the intuition that we generally understand as intuition? because she is saying it is straight knowledge is an intuition of extremely high quality. So it's hard to think of intuition being a low quality versus a high quality. But see, that's the indication. She says intuition, straight knowledge, and the accumulations in the chalice are one and the same concept. One and the same concept. Pure intuitive perception is rare. It is rare. Okay. My perception in part is this. We have to have the Antakarana Bridge pretty well built to have access to all of the accumulations in the chalice. Most people have no bridge between their lower mind and their higher mind. As we begin to build that first level of the Antakarana Bridge, which takes us from the lower mind into the higher mind, is when then some of this tension we begin to feel this tension. This is a tension, how can I explain it? It is like sitting in occult silence, and there is a need of a coworker, a need of a family member, a need of your nation, a need of humanity. And when you're sitting in occult silence, there is an impression that comes to you from the accumulation in your chalice. Now, what this means, we know that our chalices are connected with a greater chalice, right? It just depends on our own intuitive perception as to what we receive in that occult silence. So let's say that you are in contact with a chalice of a great being. And so this petal of your lotus and that petal of the great light being, lotus, there is a rapport, there's a resonance between each petal. The substance that is pouring forward from this contact comes through your consciousness, through that bridge, into your etheric brain, into your physical brain, into a particular center in your brain, as I've talked about this last 2 Sundays. A particular center. This center then has a communication with all the centers, your physical, emotional, mental body. This is what creates tension. So we want to, how can I explain this? When we vote a person into office, into a political office, a national office, or an office of leadership where their decisions will be affecting masses of people, we want them to have that bridge built. We want them to be able to sustain this fiery energy so they can receive impressions. Think of the stories that we've written. We've heard about Helena Rourke contacting Franklin Roosevelt, giving him information that she received through her own occult silence, giving Roosevelt information from hierarchy that was to prevent war. That's the kind of tension that she carried with her, that enormous tension that she had to endure. So when she is saying that this, we have straight knowledge, we have so-called intuition, and then we have pure intuition. That pure intuition, my understanding of it anyway, is when our chalice is now able to be used by the chalice of a great being. Am I speaking too abstractly? Is this just... No? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Okay. She says straight knowledge is awakened together with the intensification of the action of psychic energy. Straight knowledge is awakened together with the intensification of the action of psychic energy. Now, how do we perceive and interpret or translate what is being given to us? Because when we receive an impression through direct knowledge or so-called intuition, it doesn't come to us the way we communicate with one another. It comes in symbols, it comes in color, it comes in sound, it can be a outline of a plan. Then what are we going to do with it? And that's where the intellect comes in. Our intellect translates and then transmits the revelation of intuition. The importance of understanding this is the importance of right meditation. When people engage in the practice of wrong meditation, they're not building a bridge between their concrete mind and their higher mind. And so they become like zombies. See, they can't live that day-to-day life because they're still on that fluffy pillow in the lotus position, receiving impressions, but they have nothing to translate what's being given to them. And if they can't translate these revelations, what good is it? So we have to have a well-developed intellect to translate and transmit the revelations of intuition. Such a person is one who thinks in the light of his or her higher self. Their intellect, gets a little wordy here. So I'll read this slowly. Their intellect observes. Our intellect, as long as we are functioning, our intellect is functioning in the light of the higher mind. Our intellect is observing. What does that mean? Our soul. See, our awakened soul is now observing, while the intuition identifies. So our soul is observing, the substance of intuition is identifying, and then our intellect explains. See, this is what I'm saying. It's a little heady. It's a formula here. So this is telling us it's not our concrete mind, which is filled with opinions and prejudices and learned knowledge. don't understand that. I'm sorry, I'm kind of trying to think through this. It would be like, I really am good at typing on an electric typewriter. I know everything there is about all of these fonts. Remember the IBM, electric typewriter and these fonts. I had all of these beautiful fonts. Now somebody came over here and put a computer next to me. I don't want everything. I don't know what that is. What do you mean? What's a computer anyway? Give me a typewriter any day. The typewriter is a concrete mind. Okay. So now we have to function in the higher mind to observe what our intuition already knows. It's the best way I can put it. When it says that this person's intuition identifies, that means our intuition already knows. And now our intellect has to observe. Our intellect explains, and our intuition knows. Our intuition gives us the idea, gives us the vision, and our intellect puts it into a thought form. So it's a process. See, and the person sitting on that fluffy pillow it's like typing on the typewriter, has no idea, what the higher mind is trying to do to impress and give a vision, because their mind, their intellect cannot translate it. Not to mention transmit it. Now listen to this. A person who has pure intuition is aligned with the cosmic thinker. We talked about last week, the cosmic thinker. A person who has pure intuition is aligned with the cosmic thinker. It is the ability to see any event, any object, from the viewpoint of the cosmic whole, from its origins to its manifestation. It would be like, these are stories we've all heard, and I know a couple of us in the group have had personal experiences with this, because we were in a class where we had these experiences, where an object is given to us. He's laughing, he remembers it. An object was given to us, and we had to determine who owned the object, who was that person, where were they from, what was the significance of this object to them. And we didn't have any idea. We had no information was given to us. And so there was just a handful full of us sitting in a circle. And then we went around the room defining. And the person that was leading the class, of course, knew the story behind what we were trying to figure out. So, in a sense, this is direct knowingness. In a sense, it requires intuitive perception. It is a pure, this is from the teaching, it is a pure discriminative faculty without personality involvement. It's a pure discriminative faculty without personality involvement. If we use our intuition, we are alert and we cannot be hypnotized by the manipulation of others. You hear what that is? That we cannot be affected by the manipulation of others once we have this discriminative faculty called intuitive perception. One who has an intuitive perception is one who can gather direct knowledge about an object or an event. The person can see the cause of a problem and the effect of it on life as a whole. It is a holistic insight. A holistic insight. I hope you're perceiving all these thoughts that are bombarding us right now about how we could save the world, at least this country, by people not being manipulated. It is also an extended foresight into the affairs of the whole. This is intuitive perception. Extended foresight into the affairs of the whole. This reminds me of the story that Torkim told us and that went into a book, and I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times because the story is just so incredible. When he was a little boy and he and his friend climbed to this mountain. It took them all day to climb to the top of the mountain or where their destination was. And when they got there, there was a man in a cave. Remember this story? And as I remember it, and I'll say this we're so out of time. Where did the time go? Anyway, they started asking this man questions, and the man who had never been out of the cave gave him all the answers. And then he said, when you go down the mountain and you go into town, this is what you must look for, because this is what's going on. So what I'm giving you this a total paraphrase because this story is really beautiful. But he had intuitive perception. He had extended foresight into the affairs of the whole. If we have an intuitive perception, we can read the hearts of our friends and co-workers. We can register knowledge sent to us by higher intelligence. We can touch an object and feel the light or the darkness of an object. We are told that the intuitional body appears as a seamless robe. Its color is scarlet, like a flame. We are told that Jesus used to wear a scarlet robe. It was a beautiful, seamless robe. At the time of the crucifixion, 4 Roman soldiers wanted to cut it into 4 pieces, but because of its beauty, they cast lots for it in order not to cut it into pieces. But this robe was not needed anymore because at the crucifixion, which is the 4th initiation, Jesus was receiving the higher correspondence of the earlier robe, which was the intuitional body. His consciousness was moving into that Buddhic body, the intuitional body. Oh, gosh. Well, we're so... will you let me go over 5 minutes? Okay. This is too juicy to miss. We can have intuitional flashes upon occasion. Even children can experience intuitional flashes. These flashes come unexpectedly in any location, at any time, to almost anybody. They stay with them. This flash stays with them for a split second or longer and then disappears. Intuitional flashes are those moments when our mind experiences sudden expansions of consciousness. It is, we don't have time for that. Sorry. Anyway, in these rare moments, we can see the path that we must take. We receive the answer to our questions. We can be charged with a great energy and so on. I was thinking about my niece sitting in church one day, and she was trying to make a decision what college to go to, and the whole family was really stressed out about it. And she sat there, and all of a sudden she had an intuitional flash, and she knew where to go. So that's an example. Intuition is a moment of enlightenment when, in a second, you grasp a great truth that was a mystery for you. The effect of an intuitional flash can fade away, and the experience is not repeated. The effect depends upon the intensity and the duration of the flash, the intuitional flash. If it was of a short duration and weak intensity, it usually gives a moment of ecstasy and then fades away. I bet you're all relating to this now, right? Oh, good. If your mental body is not yet ready, the flash hits and fades away. But no matter how short the intuitional flash is, it always creates a certain transformation in us, a certain new orientation in us. It is in such a moment that all of our centers radiate with a new glow. The longer the duration of the intuitional flash, the greater will be the effect upon us and upon our life. Enlightenment is a state where the flash of intuition becomes a steady flow, where the flash of intuition, this is enlightenment, where the flash of intuition becomes a steady flow of light, and we enter into a stage of permanent activity. This would be a 4th degree initiate, an adept that is now functioning at that level. We are told that until we penetrate into the intuitional plane, we cannot graduate as a human being. To be really human means to be intuitive. And I think I'm going to stop there, you know, because we have to. But anyway, I hope you really enjoyed the talk this morning. It was a little rough, but it's not easy to talk about intuitive perception. But it's a great subject to think about and to work toward.